you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by portrait photography, or just at a loss of what to focus on to take you to that next level, then come hang with me. I help guide portrait photographers just like you to stay clear and sharp in camera and with your goals. I'm your host, photographer, educator, and weirdly positive mama of four, Emily Supio. And this is the Stay Focused podcast. Photography advice to help you stay focused. Well, hey there, I'm Emily Supio, and thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Stay Focused podcast. Now, do you remember back in the day on Sesame Street, maybe you watched it, or maybe your kids watched it, when they had like the letter of the day, or the number of the day, or the word of the day, and then everything around that episode was about that thing. Maybe I'm just feeling nostalgic for the days when my kids were young, but today's word of the day on the Stay Focused podcast is consistency. And I think that's a word that most new photographers use a lot. It's something that we strive for, that we want to have, but it's difficult to really get it. Now, I looked up right before this episode what consistency meant in the dictionary, and consistency is just harmony of one or all parts of something. And on today's episode of the Stay Focused podcast, I'm talking to a really amazing photographer. And I know I say that a lot, but she really is amazing. She has some amazing stories of how and why she started photography, but she really gets into consistency. She gets into what it means as a photographer. And she brings up some points that I didn't even think of before. But more than that, she talks about how to achieve consistency in your work. And I think this is something that a lot of us really strive for. So I think you're really going to love the episode with Katie. We'll bring her on in just a minute. If you are a new photographer who would love to find consistency in your work, but don't really understand your camera settings or miss focus too much, come join me in my free 1-hour masterclass, the 4-step framework to confidently shooting beautiful portraits. You can register for free today at cozyclicks.com/framework. You can also find the link to register in the show notes for today's show or in the description on whatever platform you are listening to this podcast right now. I hope to see you there. All right, you guys, I have Katie Lamb with us on the show today. Hi, Katie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Excellent. I'm so glad you're here with us today, Katie, because you are such an interesting person. You just like surprise me with all of these things that you have accomplished. So instead of just saying, who you are and what you do right now, can we rewind it back to, why you got into photography in the first place and kind of the story behind that? Because I think it's really cool.
Absolutely. So I guess I started out a different way than most photographers. I feel like majority of photographers, they were a mom and had children, at least in the family photography industry, and they had children and fell in love with their children and photographing them, right? So mine's kind of similar, but different in the way that mine really started with my sisters instead of my own kids. So when I was 16, my family, we adopted 2 little girls from China, and they just rocked my world and became my best friends. And the age gap there was like I was this mom figure, but also like the cool older sister. And so I just loved photographing them. And I was already in the art world. In my high school, you could kind of pick a major, and mine was already photography. But then photographing them and just my experience overseas a lot, that's where my passion really grew. And so went on to Baylor University, majored in fine art photography, which that was really before digital. So I was 100% film at the time, and never dreamed I would own my own business ever. I went into it specifically just wanting to serve overseas. And so I did that for a while and documenting the various mission organizations overseas, as well as orphan outreach programs overseas. So did that for a while in China, Western and Eastern Europe, and then Africa, and loved that. And that's where my heart was at, but it didn't pay the bills, right? And so it was truly like a passion project of mine. And I honestly had planned to move to China and my minor was in Mandarin Chinese. And then I met my husband. His life goal was not to move to China. And so we got married, and he actually was going to pursue law school after he was done playing football. And so our goal at the time, we were like, we don't want to take out loans. We want to find a way to make this work with somehow me providing for all of our, just normal home stuff and life and paying for law school. And I was a brand new business, right? I was an artsy fartsy person. So my business sense, I didn't really know it that well, but I had no choice. I was like, this is my goal. We're going to do it. And that's when my love for business really grew, was those early years, was 15 years ago, of knowing there is no other choice. It's just me having income for both of us and wanting to provide. And that's when I really grew. And we would still serve overseas together and be able to use my photography that way. But that's the heart of where my business kind of grew from, was really just overseas nonprofit work, and then fell in love with business as I was doing that.
I love that, because it's such a different story than we hear from a lot of photographers out there. I think you nailed it when you said the majority of photographers, they have kids, they love their kids, they want to take pictures of them. And you just did something so cool. So I think that's so neat. And now this is a little different, but another really cool thing about you, Katie, that I just recently learned is that, your husband didn't want to move to China. That wasn't his life goal, but he does something really cool, right? That's kind of connected to culture, pop culture, sports culture right now, right?
Correct. So he is with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's in personnel with them. We just won our other Super Bowl, which is very exciting. And so he had always knew, like, he was a football player, and knew that's still a world he wanted to be involved with. So we've been with a few teams, but we've been with the Chiefs for 8 seasons now. So very different life in our world, because my husband is gone all the time and travels all the time except off season. So definitely had to adapt my business around that for sure.
Well, that's fun. Do you ever get to take pictures of the football players or anything like that? Or is that just not your thing?
Not really my thing, no.
Just wondering. Sometimes it's fun when there's celebrities you get to shoot sometimes.
For sure. So we're in Dallas now. And so when we were living in Kansas City, it was a little different, but I'm actually based in Dallas now, and he's gone. So a little bit different since we're not near the players anymore. Sure.
So let's bring it back to today, since we kind of moved that way anyways. What is it that you shoot? What is your business based around right now? Because I know you're not a football or a sports photographer right now. So what type of photographer are you? What type of business do you have right now?
So I primarily focus on young families. And so from newborns, I don't personally shoot newborns, but my associate photographer does. And we go all the way up to just young families. So that motherhood. However, I don't shoot a ton anymore. I really cap off what I'm shooting now to really like 1 or 2 times a month. And now my business is really education for other photographers. So after being in, having my business for 15 years, just a passion for really helping others, and especially those newer photographers starting out, don't know where to go, or they've been in business 3 years and they're just like in that limbo, especially mom photographers. Like, that's my heart, is just, how do we balance being our mom is our number one and most highest calling. And how do we balance that with like running a business we're also really passionate about too? So that's where a majority of my business is now focused, rather than just on the shooting aspect.
Love it, Katie. And I love chatting with people like you that want to help people that are new to photography. I work with a lot of new photographers too. And so just connecting with you and knowing that you're kind of on the same page with me when it comes to that, I think that's great. And I think that we're kind of, not that we're missing it in the photography world, but I think that we need more educators, more people to help out, especially the new photographers that are out there. Now, I know, Katie, one thing that you were saying to me was that when you are a newer photographer and you want to start a business, consistency is really important. Can you elaborate? What exactly does that mean? Because I've heard that word thrown around quite a bit, consistency, especially new photographers. And I'm not even sure if they know really, like what does that mean to be consistent?
Absolutely. So I see that in two areas. One, consistency in your work, in your product. So meaning that, for example, for me, it was always my goal that if my photo just got thrown out there on the web, that someone that's familiar with my work would be like, oh, that's a Katie Lamb. I want people to know, like, oh, that is such a signature Katie Lamb photo, like in the way that the moment is captured, as well as just the whole vibe and aesthetic of the photo. So having such a defined and consistent brand and in your photos that it's easily recognizable to others. And then it all is cohesive together. And that benefits you because a more cohesive brand can charge more. And it also benefits your client. They know what they're going to get. They're not just like, oh, I don't know. Like she has a whole variety on her Instagram of what she shoots, and like the style's kind of different. And I think a lot of photographers, especially when they're newer, visually, they can't even fully see it yet. And so they may think, oh, I'm using the same preset on every photo, so they all look the same. When in reality, you can use the same preset or the same editing, but if your photos are shot slightly differently, those images look totally different. So really being able to dial in that consistency in your work, and then also consistency, which is just as important in your client experience. So the way that you're communicating with your clients, the way that you're delivering your product, and the way you're marketing, all of that plays in, because your client experience doesn't just start once you're at the session with them, right? Your client experience starts in your marketing, the way that they first come across your business and your website and your social media and your presence. That's where the client experience starts. And you want that to be consistent all across the board from client to client. And that really helps define that brand.
Yeah, I think you are just so point on so many of those things. And I think that whole thing with the preset, like having the same preset, or it seems to go to editing a lot, that people think they need that consistent edit, but it's not. And I love that you brought in number one, shooting, because I think that people skip through that, learning their camera and learning light and learning how to shoot. And they get so excited, because it is exciting, you guys get so excited, and you want to get into, Photoshop or Lightroom or editing, and then you want to get into the business. And so I love how you were talking about consistency in business too. But really going back, you guys, to making sure you're consistent with your shooting. I think first and foremost, before you jump into editing, before you jump into business, that's going to help you with consistency big time. But Katie, that's my take on consistency. How do you think people should start seeing consistency? Because I know they all want it. They want consistency in their work. What do you tell your students? How, like something actionable, like what can you do to get consistent in any of those areas? Shooting, editing, business. What do you think?
For sure. So it's hard for me to pick one of those. Do I do shooting and editing or business? I'll do a little bit of both.
All right.
But shooting and editing, I would say consistency, it starts, like I said, like same as your client experience starts in marketing. That's where your consistency in your shooting and editing, because the type of photos you're showing is the type of a client you're going to attract, right? And so the way you're marketing to attract the clients that are all on board for your brand and the way you're shooting, right? And then it starts long before your session, your communication with them of what to expect in their session. For example, I tell my clients, like, I tell them upfront, your child will probably cry at one point during the session. It's okay. Like, I've been doing this 15 years. I've never had a session where I couldn't make some type of magic happen. So like, I want to calm those nerves to begin with, because the way your images, the final product look, is a direct result of how comfortable they felt during their session, especially if you're more of a organic shooter where you're really focusing on those moments and emotions. And so they have to be comfortable with that. And so really my communication leading up to the session is huge. Same with like the outfits they're wearing. If you want consistency in your photos, but you're not putting a lot of focus on the outfits themselves, that's huge, because different colors will reflect like differently into the skin tones. They can give a totally different vibe. So keeping that in mind. And then when you're actually shooting, shoot in the exact same way every single time. So you can still challenge yourself and shoot outside the box, but you're still, at the end of the day, your overall lighting, you want that to be the exact same every time. And so whatever you defined your brand as, whatever's important for you there, just making sure that that's the same from location to location. For me, I choose the locations for my clients. They don't select their own locations. It's determined by me because I'm the expert, not them. I know what photographs best. So that's really big for me as well. And I could go on and on about that, but hopefully that's a little bit to help with the shooting side. And then as far as the client experience side, for me, I found that the best way to keep consistency from client to client is automation. Everything in my business that could possibly be automated is automated. You would never know on the client end side of it, but every email, everything that goes out from my business looks like it's custom written by me for each client. But actually, I'm outside playing with my kids while every single email is sent out, all the way up to the session and beyond. Once it's delivered, all those emails, they're put into a funnel where those emails are just automatically sent out on certain days in relation to their session. So that's a huge part, is if you can automate, do it, because then every client's having the exact same experience from you.
Yeah. And that's super important. I love that you brought that up too, because if you're creating a funnel for your emails and an automation, then it's the same message. It's the same thing you're telling the clients, and it's creating that consistency. And I know you guys, as we're talking about this right now, I know a lot of you that are listening are like, whoa, what are you guys talking about? That's way over my head right now. I'm not to that point yet. Don't worry, you will get there. And you'll remember this conversation that I had with Katie, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what they were talking about. And just keep that in the back of your mind right now, you guys. All right, Katie, you and I are in the creative collaboration together, which is really cool. It's a group of educators, photography educators, just like Katie and myself, who love education. And we've put it together for a really unbelievable deal. Like, you guys would think it's a scam. That's what people always ask me, like, is this for real? Like, what's the catch? What's the trick? Not a trick. It's just great value from educators who want to help people like you. And Katie, you have a full course that's included in the creative collaboration. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have included in there?
Sure. So my one of my courses is in there that's called Taking Your Own Family Self-Portraits. We've been taking our own family photos from the very beginning, when my twins were newborns, we started taking them. And so that course teaches you everything you need to know to be able to take your own family photos successfully. Or if you don't want to take your own family photos, you could use it for branding photos, because as we know, in the world we live in, people want to see the face behind the camera or the face behind the business. And so showing up, you probably noticed if you post on Instagram a picture of yourself versus your clients, you probably get a lot more interaction on the ones of yourself. So, but it can be expensive if you're constantly investing in branding sessions. So you can take your own photos of your own branding photos as well. And so this teaches everything you need to know to be able to do that.
I like that. And I don't see a lot of courses like that out there, Katie. So I think that is great in the photography world to have something like that, because I think a lot of us have those scared feelings of, oh my, how am I going to do this on my own? But we want to, right? So right. I love that that's included in there. And you guys, the creative collaboration, it's only available until March 8th. So depending on what day you are listening to this podcast, you might have just a couple hours left to grab that. So you want to check the link that is in the show notes or in the description, anywhere you're listening to this podcast right now. Check it out. You can see what Katie is offering. You'll see what I'm offering, and over 50 other photographers. It's not a scam, you guys. It's a really cool opportunity. So check it out. No obligation to grab it, but I would grab it if I were you. Katie, if people want to learn more from you directly, or they just want to see your work or what you're up to, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram at Katie Beth Lamb, and my education website is katielamb.com. And photography website is katielambphotography.com.
Right. If you guys didn't catch that all, I'm going to directly link to all of those sites also in the show notes and description on whatever platform you're listening to. So you can click that right now if you want to, or right after the show, and check out Katie's work. Tell her you listened to the show. Tell her what you found valuable from today's show. I'm sure she would appreciate that. And Katie, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for talking to me today and being here on the show. I really, really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for all you do for photographers as well.
Oh, thanks, Katie. All right. It was fantastic having Katie on the show today, but I do want to end with this. After thinking about consistency and talking to Katie, I know that it's really important, and I know it's something that a lot of you are striving for. But with all of that said, if you are a newer photographer, I don't want you to feel like you get so stuck in trying to create one consistent style for yourself that you forget about all of the other ones that are out there. Because as a new photographer, it really is important to try out and test out different styles, different lighting, different subjects until you get to what feels right for you. And when you do find that thing that feels right for you, then start working on your consistency. So if right now you're still just testing out the waters, keep doing that. Don't get so stuck in that word consistency that you don't try new things. Does that make sense? I wanted to make sure that I said that because as we started talking, I know that a lot of you are newer photographers, and I just didn't want to leave that out. Now, if you've been listening to the Stay Focused podcast for a while, I would absolutely love it if you would take a second and head over to iTunes, hit that subscribe button. And while you are there, if you would leave a rating and review for the show, I would really, really appreciate it. Now, today is the last day of the creative collaboration. So if you've been listening to the episodes of the Stay Focused podcast throughout this past month, you know that it is quite an amazing deal. If this is the first time you've heard about it, make sure to click the link that's in the show notes or the description called the Creative Collaboration and check it out and see if it's something you might be interested in. It really is an awesome deal. And if you have any questions about it, you can always reach out and ask me. All right, you guys, I am going to be back next week with a few solo episodes. We haven't done that in a while, so I'm really looking forward to that. I've got some really cool things in store for you in future episodes. So make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of them. And until next time, here's to staying in focus in camera and with your goals. Bye, you guys.